Good afternoon, everybody. It's Monday, November 20th, 2017, 2:30. We have a quorum. And first thing I want to do is open the meeting with a welcome to our newest member, Alan Banoff. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
We're glad to have you on the team. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for your very kind, welcoming email. I want to thank members of the staff, for Allison and Lisa for showing me around, and thank Margaret for her very nice letter of introduction.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
My second announcement is Nancy. This is Nancy's birthday, so happy birthday, Nancy.
And here I am.
I can wait to celebrate. Happy birthday. Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to approve the minutes from October 16th, 2017 first. Is there a motion?
Mr. President, I move we accept the minutes as amended.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No one opposed? So those minutes unanimously approved. Second, we're going to move to approve the September 23rd, 2017 public hearing minutes. Is there a motion?
I move we accept the minutes.
Second.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. So that's approved.
I'm sorry. We also have the executive session minutes if we want to approve them. They were held over from the last board meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, why do we hold them over?
Well, these are October 16th, 2017 executive session minutes. No edits were received, so can we approve them, or do we need to go into executive session to have them reviewed?
No, we can approve them.
She said I move we accept the executive committee meeting.
Is there a second?
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed? We have no additions. I mean, the things we'll be discussing during the meeting, but we have no formal additions or changes to the agenda.
No,
Lisa, any public comments?
I do have individual from General Services to discuss the chiller issue.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Are they here?
No, they're not here.
Is the Hi, are you from? You're one person? Is there somebody else?
Yeah, there will be Mr. Dice.
Okay. Mr. Dice.
Okay, the Director of General Services will be here. Okay. Alrighty, so when they come, we'll just break in. Okay, so on the agenda now is the selection of the 2018 polling places, and what Margaret did. Okay.
I handed it to you.
Oh, you got one too? Everybody should have one.
I have one. This is mine, but you can.
Everybody should have the polling place, two-sided sheet that Margaret
just handed out.
Just handed out, and Margaret broke it down into 1, 2, 3, 4 different groups.
Okay, so the first group of polling place motions deals with the facilities that are going to be leveled and we need to move to a different location. So the locations are 4-1 Maryville Elementary to Rockville Elementary, 417 Lux Manor Elementary to Kennedy Shriver Aquatic Center, 719 North Bethesda Middle School to Wingate Elementary School, 720 Ashburton Elementary School to Davis Library, 1020 Potomac Elementary School to Potomac Presbyterian Church, 1346 Lucy Barnsley to Bauer Drive Community Rec Center, and then 1338 the board was left at two different 10-2 Potomac Elementary School to Potomac Presbyterian Church. 1338 the board needs to decide if they choose to go to Silver Creek Middle School cafeteria or the Cedar Lane Unitarian Church, the sanctuary.
And the reason for this group being moved is?
The schools will be leveled.
Torn down.
Before the primary, before the general, different ones for different ones?
They're not going to be available in July or June of 2018.
So we have to move these locations.
These buildings are gone. I think Kensington Parkwood is an addition, but it's not available.
Okay, well, does anybody want to start the discussion of concerns or discussion of any of these? This is group number one.
What group, which one was the group that you said was going to be leveled?
This is the first group that I just gave you.
Oh, North Bethesda's going
Al,
to be
did you get one of them?
Oh. 'Cause I walk by that all
got
the
it.
time.
Yeah.
We're talking group one.
I put the wrong
Yeah.
page. I got it. Thank you.
I guess the thing to be discussed is, I mean, there might be many things, but obviously 1338 is showing a choice between two sites. And as I recall the discussion from the last time about it was the concern about having to cross over to the other side of a major
Connecticut
road, Connecticut Avenue, yes. And that was when you were asked to look into Cedar Lane. Do we have pictures or anything that we can? I know originally you thought Cedar Lane, Margaret, was not a good choice because we had been there in times past and it was a small room. But as I understand it, this is a different place.
The small room is definitely not large enough. We would have to go into the sanctuary and set up in that facility. Chris, are you prepared to show the pictures from?
We have some photos, yes,
Okay.
of the alternatives, the three alternatives.
Okay. Would you go ahead?
Three alternatives?
Well, the other one was the Methodist Church, but it's not ADA passable. So it's not
There's
even.
only two alternatives.
There's only two choices.
Okay.
And you have to cross Connecticut regarding Silver Creek?
Yes.
Yes, but not for Cedar Lane.
Cedar Lane is in the precinct, Silver Creek is across Connecticut Avenue from
But isn't that if a school available, we should choose the school versus the church, which is a private place?
Well,
Do we have to consider that or no?
the board, you know, my preference would be, of course, the Silver Creek Middle School because there is no cost.
Yeah.
Cedar Lane, there is a cost,
What is the cost?
$1,000 per election.
Per election. So it would be a total of 2,000 to vote there.
Legally, we are required to favor both places within the precinct over places outside the precinct and public buildings over private ones. And in this case, those go in two different directions.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Janet, there's several on there. We need one that's called addendum. The file is called addendum.
It's a nice two-dimensional picture.
So either one is going to be in the precinct?
No.
No.
No?
The Silver Creek
okay.
facility is right across Connecticut.
It's in 13th group.
So,
Connecticut's the line.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. It is in the precinct. Yes. No, Silver Creek is across Connecticut.
These are a few of the polling place changes that took place after we did our first pass-through of polling place changes. We're going to go through this, and we could return to that. But
this is
1338 is what is in discussion right now. This gives you some of the statistics regarding the Unitarian Church, and as Margaret said, we would need to use the sanctuary. The room we've used in the past would be way too small to accommodate 4,366 voters. This is a view of the church. the entrance, and that goes back to the sanctuary. An aerial, there's 134 parking spaces. This is a presentation. The red is the no electioneering zone. And there are 2 handicap spaces.
Actually,
Another
there's,
additional-
across the street, there's 3 more.
So there's a total of 5. And this is the sanctuary. It's 3640 square feet. And now this is the Christ Episcopal Church. And we've deemed this inaccessible. It is not ADA compliant. I'll run through this quickly. You've seen these photos in the previous presentation earlier in the spring. No electioneering, the handicap. This is the room that we would be voting in. This is what truly makes this location inaccessible. A cab for the elevator needs to be at least 5 foot square. The dimensions on this are 36 by 48. Basically, an individual would need to back in to be able to handle the gate. And then the controls are around on the other side of the phone there. That's non-compliant as well. They're not at a level that a person could reach easily if they were sitting in a wheelchair. Another portion of the access is this door opens to get to this gate. This doorknob is not compliant. There's no way that we could make this. Plus, it has a little bit of a glitch to it. If you should bump into the side where the controls are, it stops the elevator. So it really is not something that we even feel that we have something remedial to take care of this. So we have deemed this location non-compliant. Silver Creek 1338, Silver Creek Middle, still would be hosting the same number of registered voters, and this is my recommendation. It opened in 2017 as a middle school. Has a Kensington address.
So it's a brand new building.
It's a brand new building. This is the entrance. The polling room, the cafeteria that we would be using is right inside of those doors. We don't have anything later than that. We've been out and counted the parking's 149. This is a view of the parking. This is the no electioneering zone, the red overlay. Handicap parking. And this is the room. It's 5,700 square feet.
What do you mean you have to cross Connecticut?
There is a map. This is Connecticut Avenue.
What's the boundaries of the precinct?
Connecticut.
That is the
Connecticut Avenue is the boundary of the
right.
precinct.
If you follow this, it goes up like that and around. So it's half of this map that you see. 1303 technically is where Silver Creek is, the location, the address.
And where do they
We're
vote?
hosting people that go to this polling place.
Temple Emmanuel.
They are at Temple. Okay, yeah.
That's my precinct.
Sure.
And this is Cedar Lane. It's off of Beach. This is the Episcopal Church that we have decided is not appropriate. And these voters here would be going there to vote if Cedar or Silver Creek was chosen. Shall
There is a light there. People can use the light. It is appears to be a well-used walking path, bicycle path. There's a pedestrian signal there to also aid anybody, and there's a trail that goes near there. So, just for purposes of, that we prefer to use a public school, if it's a public facility, and it would only be until Kensington comes back online. We think it's a prudent choice for the board.
How many election cycles is it going to be unavailable?
The school will be back online in 2020.
Correct. What they're doing is they added a wing on Kensington Parkwood, and during the time that we would need it in June, they're bringing that wing in and connecting it to the main part of the building. So they tear down some walls and join the two structures. So that will take them the summer of 2018, but it would be available in 2020.
I don't believe there's a motion in front of the board right now. Can I make one?
What to do what?
Do you have a motion?
I'd be happy to.
Go ahead.
Motion, yeah.
I would move that we make the polling place at Cedar Lane Unitarian Church.
I second.
To the church?
At the church, yes. And if I can speak to it, I'd be.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to it. As I mentioned before, by law, we have two conflicting priorities we're supposed to give here, which kind of cancel each other out to a certain extent, as far as the law is concerned, I guess. Kevin, where the law is concerned, do they tell us which priority to make over the other?
They do not.
Okay.
They tell you to consider both factors.
Right. So we have a public building that is across a major roadway from the precinct, and we have a suitable private building that is within the precinct. And this board has voted previously, I believe unanimously, to favor making it possible for voters to walk to their polling places. And the example that I can think of off the top of my head is that we have a polling place in 1342 in Silver Spring, where the staff had recommended that we move them to Northwood High School, which is across University Boulevard, which now that I think of it is actually just the extension of Connecticut Avenue. We voted to keep the polling place in the now private building. In that case, it's a former school, because we wanted to make it as convenient as possible for voters, so that if they do want to walk to the polls, they have that as an option. Crossing Connecticut Avenue is a big deal, and portions of Saul Road, it's about 3/10 of a mile along Saul Road to get from Connecticut Avenue to Silver Creek Middle School. I'm looking on Street View of Google right now, and there are portions of that do not have sidewalks. I think asking people to not only cross Connecticut Avenue, but to walk along a neighborhood street, some of it has sidewalks, some of it doesn't, I think that's a lot to ask. So that's why I'm suggesting that we go with the Cedar Lane Church.
Chris, can you put up the sanctuary?
The church, just fresh idea.
Yeah.
This is the sanctuary.
Very nice.
Did you want to see the outer portion of the building again?
No, just the facility.
It's the only view you have of that room, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
From our perspective, it's open on the end that face it. That's the stage, and on the other end is open doors into the sanctuary.
Chris, we have to stop for a moment. We're having difficulty with the recording. And then we want to get you and your people in and out.
Was there anything else you wanted to view?
Let me see.
This is good.
Up on top of the stage there.
Yes.
What is those doors? The panels, they look like they open, or they could be totally closed.
They can close, so that stage area would be closed during voting.
There's a folding
Okay,
door.
so there don't appear to be any religious
No, there is not.
elements to the room.
And we're going to have the piano too?
Absolutely. Entertainment for the voters.
Yes.
Yeah, the piano will stay.
Jim, can I comment about
Sure,
the school?
absolutely.
It's my neighborhood. Besides the fact that there are not sidewalks all the way from Connecticut Avenue to the school is on a hill, and people who would go in a wheelchair have to go uphill and around to get into the school.
Okay. Can I just ask, why does the staff prefer the school as opposed to the church?
Money,
It's $1,000 for the whole primary?
$1,000 for the primary, $1,000 for the general election.
Well, they're two different fiscal years.
Right.
If I may
Sure.
speak in favor, I seconded the motion.
That's okay.
You know, I think when we've had instances where we, you know, had to cross a major road, it's always been an issue for us, and we do everything to try and avoid that. I can't, you know, remember the specifics. I'm not as good as David at these, but I know that there have been many times when we did opt to have, you know, a place where we didn't have to have people cross a major road. Also, in this case, it's keeping it within the precinct, within the boundaries of the precinct, and I think that's important too. It's going to be easier for everybody in that precinct. They all know where this is, etc.
Alex, did you
So
want to say
this is not the one that, Christine, you said had an ADA compliance problem?
No.
This is ADA. The Unitarian Church is compliant.
Now, David, I know you had expressed concern in the past about requiring Orthodox Jews to go into a Christian sanctuary to vote. Do you not have those concerns here?
Not without religious symbols. I don't believe it's an issue. I am not a rabbi, so therefore I can't say it with 100% certainty. But I'm not concerned about it because I think the lack of religious symbols is what makes it welcoming to all. There's also a provision of state law that Kevin pointed out to me, I believe, that says that if a voter is unable to vote there, they can actually request a different polling place. I think it's very unlikely to happen, but if it does, I think there is that eventuality.
Okay. Any other discussion? Now, are we just talking about this one place or all of
Just the one. I just made a motion on one.
Just
Okay.
for the
So you
one.
just have a
Any further
motion for
discussion? All right, all those in favor of David's motion to use the Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay.
So I move we accept 401, 417, 419, 720, 1002, the changes which
You're moving to move all of
them, yeah.
all of group
All
one.
of category number one?
Group number 1.
Is there a second?
And 1346.
And 1346, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on group one? All those in favor of moving to change the polling places in group one, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Okay, so all of one we've dealt with. Okay.
Mr. President, Mr. Dice and some of his staff are here.
Good.
I would like to ask that the polling places with the HVAC chiller issue be discussed at this time. Mr. Dice?
Come up, join us.
Join us here.
Group number 4.
Group number 4.
You want to give Mr. Dicey?
I provided the board with Thursday with the copy of the report from Denise, a staff member of the Department of General Services, that described that chillers were not really an option, or at least not a safe option, for the 2016 election. So I'm going to ask David. Here, I'll move.
2018?
2018. I don't know why I keep getting stuck on 16.
Does
good old days.
Yeah.
Does Mr. Dice have that group of 4?
Yes, Mr. Dykes is going to
No,
talk
he doesn't.
about
Does he?
there are 5 precincts. 515 Cloverly Elementary, 68 Stone Mill Elementary, 81 Olney Elementary, 99 Whetstone Elementary, 12-4 and 2-9 Lois P. Rockwell Elementary. We do have alternate sites available that Chris went out and found and did not release them, even though we seem to have had a positive discussion with the school system. And so I'll leave it to David to go into the issues that the chiller, why we cannot use chillers at these 5 locations.
First, on behalf of the board, welcome to
Thank
you and
you.
your
Glad
staff.
to be here.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you've heard that to the board, we're very concerned about moving thousands and thousands of voters for the election. We like to keep people at the same polling place. Very important. And unfortunately, this year, there's a tremendous amount of voters that we have to move.
Mm.
So anything that can be done to keep people where they've been voting is certainly a priority for us.
Well, and we are sensitive to that, but these schools are all scheduled by the schools for renovation, and so their systems essentially will be shut down, their mechanical systems. And where the board typically likes to hold the polling, understandably, are in the large rooms, the cafeterias, the open spaces. Those are problematic for our purposes, for artificial or additional cooling, because they're so large. The portable coolers that are typical, or that you may have seen in certain spaces, the large boxes with the ducts coming out of them, are perfectly suitable for smaller spaces. But in a large auditorium or cafeteria type setting, they frankly are inefficient. And so you'd have to bring a large number of them in if you were going to do that. Another option in those schools would be to use classrooms, a series of smaller rooms, which we could cool more efficiently. But again, because you're using smaller rooms, you have to use more of them, which means more equipment. And I have just a few of these in stock. So to address all of these locations and the number of schools that you would have to use, we would have to rent some additional units. So we did, Ms. Wade, who is sitting over here, wave your hand, Denise, and Ismi Ayala Colazo, who is manager of my facilities division, and her staff went out and looked at each one of these locations. So I guess let me start with the bad news. In order to make these work, particularly in the June timeframe that we're talking about, where temperatures can get high, we have to make sure the rooms are sufficiently comfortable, which means that we need, once we get them cooled to a certain temperature, 72, 74, 75 degrees, we need to keep them that way. That's going to require generators to keep those units running. And in most cases, those generators are probably going to have to run 24 hours a day, if not 18 hours a day. And as we all know, particularly these local small neighborhood elementary schools are tucked right in residential areas. It's my experience doing what I've done for a long time is that someone doesn't like to have a generator running right outside their bedroom window for 24 hours a day. And so the other challenge would be if we were to have that unit inside, how do we bring the power? And these units require, they intake air and then they blow out warm air. They're machines, so they generate BTUs. And I have to do something with the heat that unit generates too. Typically what we do is then we duct it out a window. In some of these schools, the windows don't open. So we would have to try and coordinate with the schools to have them remove panes of glass in order to allow us to duct the warm air generated by these coolers out to atmosphere. So we went back and looked at all of this. And the logistical challenges, none of which are insurmountable. The use of the equipment, which is not insurmountable. As I tell people, I can park school buses on the moon if you pay me enough. So it really does come down to money. And we estimated between a generator, and some generators might be able to operate 2 units, but a generator, spot cooler, the duct work, the diesel fuel that the generator requires to run on, along with the installation, we're talking over $8,000 per classroom.
Per classroom.
per room. Right,
8,000?
per room.
And you're
right.
talking multiple classrooms within each precinct.
It depends on how large the classroom is, of course, but the nice thing about classrooms is that it's like this room. It's small, it's contained, it's easier to cool. You take a cafeteria, which is 4 or 5 times the size of this room, particularly with voters coming in and out all the time. You're not controlling the air, so you're typically sucking in warm air and cooling. This is the same reason you tell your children to close the door behind them in the summer, because you don't want to cool the outdoors. It's the same sort of situation. So regulating the temperatures is going to be a challenge as well. So I just wanted to make sure the board had a very clear understanding of the lift that this represents. Certainly am sympathetic. We're no stranger to trying to convince the board to relocate polling places. We understand the challenges there, but it is going to be costly.
You know, these 5 schools, that's over 16,000 voters we have to move. What frustrates me, you know, and I've heard it before, the reason, it's only 11 days between when school starts and the primary. You know, and I was just frustrated that they couldn't wait 11 days to do it.
Well, you know, I don't know to what extent you've had conversations with the schools. Okay, well, then your conversations with the schools are as successful as my conversations with schools are when it comes to this. They're on a schedule. They have a narrow window. I am not unsympathetic to their plight. It's rough that there's so many schools involved in this at the same time. 1 or 2 schools might have been palatable, but we're dealing with multiple locations. So, but we're talking to rent a cooler is at least $1,300, just one. And if the room's larger, you might need 2.
So what would it cost to cool these 5 schools?
Well, I'm assuming a standard 30 by 40 classroom. So you tell me how many polling positions could you set up?
More than one.
You
would have to check in one, and you'd have to, go.
And you'd have to chop it up because they're not.
Right.
I mean,
You can't open the rooms up, so you're talking about.
Can you give us an estimate as to what it would cost for the?
Well, I'm going to assume at least 2, probably 3 classrooms per school. Given what I saw your setup was at the ballroom for the Wheaton Rescue Squad, I'm going to assume 3 classrooms. So that's about $24,000 per school. So we're talking $110,000 to $120,000.
Would that be for the primary and general, or you're just?
Just for the
It would be
primary.
for the primary, only the primary. Because the general's occurring in November, schools will have done its work.
Right. Dave?
Mr. President, one of the things I wanted to point out was that one of the options that I was going to suggest that the board think about instead of this, again, fairly expensive process would be to consider assigning only for the primary the 5 locations that Chris has lined up, because given the historically low turnout in primaries, 2006 when we had no early voting it was 23%, and in 2014 it was only 13.5%. We would have the voters vote at the temporary site. So in this case, instead of Cloverly Elementary, they'd go to St. Andrews. Every voter that would walk into the precinct and vote, we would ask them to fill out a postcard that is self-addressed to them, that we would mail back to the voter, telling them that their regular polling place would be available for the November election at, in this example, Cloverly Elementary. Lisa, would you give me the brochure? As I mentioned in the last meeting, we are going to be sending out a brochure to the voters, and instead of putting the picture of St. Andrews, we could reinstate the picture of Cloverly Elementary and send this to all of the voters, reminding them that they would have their polling place back for the November election. We could have signs placed at St. Andrews, sending people back to Cloverly Elementary, And then finally, we have the sample ballot that would be mailed approximately 1 week prior to the deadline to register to vote. This would be one way to mitigate and not spend $124,000 to get chillers. We would still identify with this document that this is a construction issue that was caused by the school system. And people, the vast majority of people would know, we would have reached out to them at least 4 times, telling them that they get to go back to Cloverly Elementary to vote in the November election. I know that the board does not historically want to change polling places between elections, but this is, as I said to you on the phone, in the 29 years that I've been doing elections, this is the oddest thing I've ever had to deal with. The fact that the legislature chose to have the election on the 4th Tuesday of June has certainly created a lot of problems for this department. The other thing would be to just send this all the same information, the information regarding the polling place changes, and have the voters vote this one time at the 5 locations that we have suggested. I know that moving the polling places has really been frowned upon by the board. There's no regulatory prohibition. We could do it.
Sure.
And we would certainly work with the county to message it out as much as we humanly could. So I would like the board to consider those 2 options, which I think are, at least for the fiscal situation, are more prudent.
The 2 options being moving the polling place for the primary and the general, or just moving it for the primary and notifying people that for the general they'll be back.
Right.
David, did you say that?
Yeah, well, I was going to respond to, I was going to ask Mr. Dice a question, but let me start with, if you don't mind, with what Margaret just said. Kevin, the statute provides that we are to choose polling places by a certain time and not change them over a certain period of time. And my question for you is it legal under law and regulation for us to have a polling place in one place in the primary and a different place in the general? Because I was always under the impression that it was not.
I think the board can do that. It usually gets that approved by the state
By the
board,
state.
but it can be the polling places can be sent to the state with this is where it's going to be for the primary and this is what it's going to be for the general, mindful of the fact that it's, because of the situation.
So it's your view that the law allows us to do that as long as we decided in advance of
Correct.
Whatever that. And for Margaret, have we done this ever before?
No.
You don't think it's more confusing to vote 2 different places in one cycle?
There's research that says that it is.
I wanted to give you an option. There is, of course, we could go back to the county and ask for $124,000, or the school system and ask them to give us $124,000.
Good luck. Good luck.
Or we could do this option, which quite honestly does require a lot of extra effort on the part of the staff to make sure that we're constantly reaching out to these 5 precincts, 6 precincts actually, so that the voters are made aware of the change. Or we just bite the bullet and say, for 2018, these 6 precincts will have to be changed to the 6 locations, or the 5 precincts: St. Andrews, Dasic North Potomac Community Center, which is a wonderful location, St. Peter's Parish, the Covenant Methodist Church, and Cedar Grove Elementary.
You said you gave us the bad news. Where's the good news?
There is no good news.
Okay, here we go.
If I can just, with the
Go ahead, then we'll get
President's
Marion.
permission, just to add a couple of things. We did check out the alternates that had been proposed and found that they're all perfectly satisfactory and there's no problems. They're all ADA compliant, and we don't anticipate any challenges with those from a facility standpoint. If it is the board's desire to, as Margaret says, bite the bullet and press forward and get the 124, 150, if it's your pleasure to do that, what I would ask, let us go back. This is a rough estimate. Let me go back and get some hard numbers so that I have a defensible number. Not that this isn't, but it's broad. And we'd go back and actually work with you to pick the classroom or classrooms and find out exactly what was necessary by way of removing window panes or, the odd errant rock that suddenly flies through a glass, whatever it would take to do that. So that's number one. Number two, again, if it's the board's desire to proceed with the established polling places, I would suggest some communications with the surrounding neighborhoods, because there will be noise from generators operating supplying power to the cooling units. And again, it's my experience that people don't like that. So it might have, as an alternate, because there is a noise ordinance, we'd have to get a waiver. And assuming we got the waiver, or the board may say, we'll start the generators up at 7 a.m. and shut them down later, and just worry about the discomfort of early morning while the room cools. That's another option.
Marianne?
First of all, let me say, this whole discussion is a bit shocking to me, because we have been under the impression for over a month, since before our last board meeting, that this was practically a done deal. That the whole issue, the good news when we came away, we got the bad news from the school system, but then we got the good news that, hey, we have these chillers. And, never was there any discussion about, well, hopefully the size or the this or the that. So here we are at something of the 11th hour for us in terms of when we have to submit to the state our final selection of polling places, getting terrible news.
Well, Keith, I don't think there was ever any, here's an almost ironclad guarantee. It was always, we'll have Mr. Dice look into the feasibility of this, and looking at the sites and what it would take. And it took time to work through that. And there was, most of the time there was a hope that the school system would be able to change the schedule of when the work would be done. But I know I didn't, and I don't think Mr. Dice ever said, this is a done deal. It's feasible. It's feasible. But what would it take to do that? The feasibility, yes, we said, it's feasible. But what's it going to take? And that's
it was a little more specific than that, Mike.
I mean, Mr. Dice never guaranteed.
I haven't had a conversation with Mr. Dice, nor he with us. But I'm just saying what we've been led to believe was that, oh, good news, they got these because. And David has some figures here. The school board also gave us an estimate or the superintendent's office gave us an estimate as to what could be done for cooling purposes, and it was less than this amount.
No, it was more
than this amount.
It was more.
My question from Mr. Dice was, have you seen the superintendent's letter from October 4th?
No, I have not.
And I gather that means you also haven't talked to the school system staff about any of this.
No.
Because I was thinking that if we were actually going to attempt to do any of this, that we would want to talk to the school system facilities people as well.
about what the practicality of the situation is. What I recall from before was this letter is dated October 4th from the superintendent. He basically said, here's what we're able to do, here's what we're not able to do, here's what we're able to do with more money. And this was in the category of here's what we're able to do with more money. And it was at that time that we were told, well, wait a second, before because my first reaction was, oh, good, let's go to the council and ask for money in October. I think at that time we were told, well, wait a second, the county owns chillers. And so we don't need to do that.
By the way, we do. We have 5 spot coolers, but that's not enough.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not suggesting that it wasn't the case. I guess I'm just suggesting that to me the situation is pretty much the same as it was back in early October. Unfortunately, we've lost that time, but it's pretty much the same situation, and it's a question of whether the county wants to spend that kind of money. Obviously, we don't have it sitting in an account somewhere, and I'm quite sure the school system doesn't, and Mr. Dice doesn't either. So on the other hand, we know that the county government, both the executive and the council, use elections as a high priority. So and we do know that there is specific research that says that if you move a polling place, a certain percentage of people, no matter what interventions you take, turnout will drop by some percentage because of moving the polling place. And I think that under those circumstances and the fact that this has never been done before, I'm not sure that I want to be part of the board that votes to split the primary and the general, because I think that also has problems. I think we could go ask for the money.
Al?
Mr. President, I have a question for Mr. Dice. I'm an engineer. You said you have 5 chillers. Assuming that the temperature's in the 90s, how hot would it be if you put a chiller in each one of these auditoriums or multipurpose rooms?
In the room itself,
Yeah.
we're seeing a classroom, not an auditorium.
I'm not talking about an auditorium as opposed to a classroom. The places where we used to...
Oh, in like the cafeteria?
Well, these are all elementary schools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if the room temperature without chilling was 90 degrees and I put one of these spot coolers in there, it would be about 89.8 degrees.
Thank you.
Margaret, when do we have to tell the state board what our polling places are?
Now, there is a tremendous... I think the deadline is actually in January. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It is.
All right. We need to get this done because we're trying to change all of these polling places. We need to enter all this data into the Maryland voter registration system, and then do a GIS interface so that the street file is correct. I'm open to okay. I just don't right now see much success in going and asking for $150,000 for additional coolant or coolers, chillers, when there are 5 locations that are available. And they have agreed to host the election.
I was just going to say that the legal deadline, and I don't remember what it is, but it's more or less immaterial for us because of the amount of work that we need to do that really is in advance of when that deadline would be. It's getting all the systems up and ready, getting the GIS interface done, getting the training databases ready for us to be able to launch our election judge recruitment. The longer we wait, the more work there is between that date when we finalize and when we can have our systems get going for the election, especially in election judge recruiting.
Mr. President, I think the board also needs to consider, you all have spent a lot of time going in and out of polling places, how that's going to work having this in an elementary school classroom.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've been in an elementary school classroom, but there's usually one door in and out of the classroom?
Yes.
Yeah.
Logistically, I would suggest the board needs to look at how that's going to fly in terms of how you're going to flow voters in and out of this.
Yeah. And it's not like the rooms connect. I mean, people have to be going in one door, out another, into another.
Yeah, we did not look at any specific classroom. We just took a typical classroom size. You'd really have to visit each school to see if, in fact, the conditions that I've represented are possible.
Yeah, some classrooms have doors to the outside. The kindergarten rooms usually do.
Oh,
I mean,
Marianne?
Margaret, I'm interested. The only other time that I know that we've had, a large number of polling places that we've had to move around was right after redistricting. How does this compare? Do you have an idea of those numbers at all as to?
I don't think the numbers are the number of voters that are being moved are not as high as when we had to do redistricting. And as you recall, we had to do redistricting in two parts. There was part one, and then there was part two.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of people that were moved around.
Well, as difficult as this is, and I know we're dealing with big numbers here, and Jim pointed that out to us earlier when we first saw it, and what it meant, and people don't like to move ever, we understand that. But I think just as in the case of when we had to explain to voters that due to redistricting by law we had to do A, B, and C, to accommodate it. I think it's going to be important that the communication around this, I don't want to say blame the education folks, but we have to, put it where it is, but, due to the timing of this election, combined with the timing of what has to happen with schools once they're out in construction, that we needed to undertake this rather large move of polling places. And I think it's probably going to be my recommendation that that's the way to go, and not attempt to try and cool places that are going to be hard to cool and expensive to cool, and might not work in the long run.
And we bring in a lot of equipment that generates heat because it's all computer equipment.
That's right.
President, there is another way to think about this. I mean, it's not an ideal situation no matter how you look at it, but if turnout was 13% in the primary last time, I'll be surprised if it's greater than 13% this coming time, and it might be even lower than that. If you decide to move them for the primary but then go back to the original polling place for the general, for 90% of the people who don't vote in the primary, you're not going to be changing them at all.
That's true.
And the people who vote in primaries tend to be the most engaged, intelligent, and informed voters that we have. And I think that, we can probably trust that they're going to be attentive enough to know that there has been this switch for the primary and the general. It's not ideal, I understand, but for 90% of the people, you're actually doing it that way. You wouldn't be changing it at all. They'd be used to voting, and they will vote in the general in 2018 where they voted in 2016.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's all these options are on the table. I mean, my concern is we're moving 63,000 voters. It's 1/10 of our registered voters.
But 7,000 of those individuals are moving back to their original precinct.
No, I know. But right now there's 25 candidates filed for the county council at large. Some candidate's going to lose by 12 votes, and they're going to say, I lost because the Board of Elections moved my power strength, my community, to another poll.
And you can respond by saying we made 4 direct mail piece contacts to those individuals, telling them where their polling place is. Plus, we had the Department of General Services create signs hanging on the schools telling people where their polling place
no, I know.
is.
Somehow I knew I was going to get
I sound like a broken record, but if they just waited 11 days, we wouldn't have this.
But we always have polling place changes. So
no, but it's 1/10 of our registered voters.
If we do one with publicity,
that's more than the city of Rockville.
Yeah, if you don't have a choice, we just go what Margaret said. We reach out to them.
It's not a good situation. Anybody else have any thoughts? Al, what are your thoughts? I want to hear your thoughts. As a newest member, a fresh set of eyes.
I'm on the spot.
Yes.
I don't have numbers with me, but I could look back.
I'm just curious with you.
And tell you how many voters we changed in each election cycle. We've typically changed 40,066 during the redistricting, and honestly, most people took it in stride, and we had very few complaints about. We had calls about why was my polling place changed, and when we explained the issue, the voter was receptive to that and agreed that they would go on to the new polling place.
Because notwithstanding the causes, on election day they're going to look at us as we're the reason the polls were changed, even though we've been fighting not to change it.
That's why they pay you the big bucks, Jim.
Now, what do you think?
A couple of observations. It seems too expensive to try to cool those places. I'm in favor, I can't vote, of keeping the polling places the same for the primary and the general. I had the impression, as David mentioned, that there's a state law that required that you keep the same polling place if you could. And I guess you want to be on record as telling the school system in the future, please do your construction after the primary.
Oh, before we tell the school system, I think we should tell the legislature that the date for this election was horrendous.
Right.
And that is really the root of the problem.
That's true.
I see.
Yeah. Once again, just to frame the discussion before we grab pitchforks and torches and head for the school board, they have a Herculean task every year to try and renovate schools, and they are literally in there the day after school closes, and they're sweeping the floors the day before schools open. And they have a very narrow window to do what they do. So I think the issue, yes, is probably that the primary was before or after schools closed.
And just to back that up, having dealt with their budget for 20 years, they're on a very tight schedule, and they're always worried about what's going to happen and delays that'll pull over into the school year. So.
Well, we're talking about Group 4, right?
Yes.
All right, do we have a motion? Well, there's two proposals. Margaret has two proposals. How did we? One is to make the change for both the primary and the general. And the second proposal is to move the polling place in Group 4 for the primary, but back to the original in the general. That seems to be the options, right?
Yes, those are your options.
Well, I'll put a motion on the board, on the floor, that we move these polling places in Group 4.
Sorry, Ms. Keefe, not everyone will know what Group 4 is. Can we identify the polling places?
Those are the polling places that are affected by the HVAC construction. Do you want each one of them read? Precinct 515, 608, 801, 909, 1204, and 209. And that they be moved to the suggested locations for both the primary and the general election. I
think so.
And with multiple notification going out to all of the residents affected, all of the voters affected in those precincts.
A second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of Mary Ann's motion to move these polling places for both the primary and the general, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so it's 4-1.
No, I thought it was 3-2.
No. 3-2.
3-2.
No.
3-1.
3-2.
No, it's 4-1.
David and Alice.
David voted against.
Oh, you voted against?
I voted against.
So it's
Alex, you were against it also. I voted no, and Mr. President, just for the record, I think actually it would cause less confusion to move it only for the primary, because I think for most 90% of the people, you're not going to be changing them at all. So it's not that don't favor moving them in principle, but I think moving it back to the original precinct in November would be the better idea. But I understand reasonable people may disagree about that.
And I'll just say for the record, because that was not my perspective. My perspective was that we had not made the effort to see whether the funding would be available to cool the current locations, and without having made that effort, I didn't want to make the motion at this time.
Based of the county budget things, it's impossible to get that amount
So,
of money.
Lisa, it was 3-2.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So, Mr. Dice, thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So make sure we have the spelling of your name for our flyers to let
Giving my home phone number.
Yes. Please call Mr. Dice.
Well, we will continue to work with Margaret on the signage. I think perhaps including putting signs at the old polling places.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that people
That'll
know
be important
Thank you.
as well.
Appreciate it.
Turn around and go that way.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me make sure I sign in. So that
Next time you should
Thank
bring
you.
a chiller and show it to us.
You need to ask that.
We got to get a picture for the voting guide, Mr. Dice.
Okay. Next group is motion to move the following polling places. This is a miscellaneous change. 2-6, that is to move it in precinct. 2-8, to move it into a larger facility. 427, 438, this is a split of a combined precinct. 5-5, Springbrook High School, this is again a split of a combined precinct. 810, only swim center is under construction. 940, the retreat at the Crown has asked us to leave. And 1367, 1368 has been a request to split precinct to 1367 to split that precinct into and move it, the one precinct to Bosco Cristo Rey High School.
And just to clarify, that 1367 one is actually changing the boundaries of the precinct back to what they were previously. We had merged them, and now this would be re-splitting them.
Supported by
The other
city
is
council.
taking precincts that were voting at the same location and moving them so they are no longer voting at the same location. But that's not changing the precinct boundaries.
Can we move and then talk?
We'll get it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I move
Is
we
there a move
accept. I move we accept the changes.
67, 68.
And this is the motion on category 2.
Correct.
Is there a second?
I second.
Discussion? Dave?
A question. 940 was not on the list that was mailed out in October. So can you tell us about when
Chris?
that came about and what that's about?
That's the retreat at the Crown?
We have it so that you could see slides.
We are in the process of gathering all the final leases. In fact, we were down to 3, and they were one of them. And they decided that at the last minute that the retreat clubhouse would no longer be available to us on June 26th.
Yes.
And
Who are they?
the owners of the Crown condo apartment complex
Okay.
at the Rio.
Okay.
So,
So it was
those
unavailable at
they
any
declined to sign the lease.
at any price.
right. This precinct is in Gaithersburg, and this location has voted at the Isaac Walton League of America in the city of Gaithersburg elections. Not the most recent one, but in the past.
Oh, Janet, I told you wrong. It was on the addendum one.
This is the retreat, right? We're looking
Yes. We had sent a lease requesting that they host us again for the 2018, and a decision was made by their organization that they would not host the election.
Were they sort of late in responding to this?
Very.
Yeah.
Very.
Okay.
Very. Thank you, Jen. I'm sorry. 940, Isaac Walton. We'd be hosting the people that have in the past voted at the retreat. It's 2,256. This is the location. This is the entrance that we would use. The retreat is here, and it was within 940. Isaac Walton is here, and it's in 98. Now, these people, up until 2016, voted here at Fields Road Elementary School. So the distance between the league, the Isaac Walton League, and the school is marginal.
Oh, they voted out of precinct before that.
Well, yes.
Okay.
We split the precinct. This entire precinct was 906 prior to us splitting up the population in 2016.
How long have they been at
940
Crown?
is the Crown development, and there's a tremendous amount of development going in there.
Yeah.
940, and if you were to drive past it, there is additional construction, more apartments, more condos, more townhouses going into that specific tiny area. I think you might remember there was the farm that was there, and there was a big legal battle between the family and Johns Hopkins over that property, and Hopkins sold it, and it's now into major league development. So that precinct, which was the old part of the city of Gaithersburg, had always voted at Isaac Walton in the city elections. The reason we're not at the school, Fields Elementary, is because we outgrew, only one precinct can be in that location. There is simply not enough room to have what was close to 5,000 individuals at that tiny elementary school. So 940, our recommendation is that they can just go across, what street is that?
Is it Muddy Branch?
Sam
I.
Yeah.
What most
That's
of
a major. That's a major.
That's way bigger than Connecticut Avenue.
this is This is the Washingtonian Rio area. This is the Crown Farm area. They would come up here, which is Fields Road. They would go down slightly, and then they go across to Muddy Branch and up. There are lights here.
How long were they voting at the retreat at Crown West?
Just for 16. That was the first time.
Brand
We
new.
split, because of the population, as Margaret said,
Right.
we split in 16 so that this portion, knowing that we're constantly growing in here, would be able to have their own precinct.
And did 9-6 vote at the elementary school or at the...
9-6 will continue to vote at the elementary school.
Oh, I see. This is a separate polling place for 940.
Yes, we
No.
still have Fields Road planning to host the voters from 9-6.
And are there
Which is also on the other side of San Mike Highway.
And are there no possible locations within precinct?
No. I spoke at length with the Washingtonian. The only room that they said would possibly be available or appropriate was on the 21st floor.
And Margaret, the retreat just didn't want to do this again? Is that what it
Pretty
was?
much.
Yeah.
That's
Did they say
basically
why?
it.
I think it has something to do with the fact that the clubhouse is part of the pool.
And in June, their pool will be open in June.
Of course.
And they're doing a lot of construction in the area.
It is a big construction area too.
And my recollection is that we were right down to the wire in 2016 to be able to use it, correct, Chris?
Correct.
Yeah, we were close to a temporary, what is that?
And as Margaret said, these people here, for the municipal elections, are accustomed to voting there.
Right, the municipal turnout is even lower than our primaries.
And this is where they voted prior to 2016.
No, they voted at Fields.
Oh.
Prior to 9-6 just got too big with the development of Crown. So we had to, and with the expected development that if you drive past, you'll see. So what we did was we separated a portion of the old of 9-6 and created 940, so that we would have more another option to vote. And the retreat agreed to allow us to vote there in 2016. Kevin is correct. We were down to the wire with regards to getting an occupancy permit for the clubhouse there. And the fact that the pool is there did create some problems for the 2018 election cycle. The Isaac Walton League is a wonderful facility. It's got plenty of parking. It's there's plenty of handicap parking, and it's a beautiful place to host an election.
I don't see any problem.
And how much does it cost?
$1,500 for an election, so it would be $3,000.
I don't have any idea.
Yeah, I know.
Did the retreat cost anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a little less. I think it was 11.
They don't have
So
school in that area.
there wasn't a big jump in what we would have planned on spending for 2018.
We don't have another choice. Yes.
What
Mr.
if
Bannon.
you offered them $1,500 to go back to the retreat?
You still have the summer in the pool.
Well, it's one day.
And honestly, as much as convenient as the retreat is right now, we've probably grown out of that room right now. The parking, there's probably a dozen parking spaces at that location because they anticipate that everyone that uses the pool is going to walk in. So there's very
And a lot of
little
them can't.
parking, and the room is small. So we would grow out of it. I cannot see, after going through 2 years with the construction, the change that I've seen over 2 years, going another 2 years and being able to use the retreat. The location is too small.
Why is the Washingtonian Center 21st floor out of the question? Requires an elevator.
It requires an elevator. They did not take me up, but that would be the only room that she thought would be something that we could consider.
How large is the room?
She didn't take me up there because she really was discouraging us from using the location.
Okay, so this is
Okay.
category 2. Is there a motion on the floor?
Yeah. Did I?
No,
did-
I think who made the motion?
I made the
And Alex
motion.
seconded.
But I can.
Okay, is there any further discussion on making the polling place moves in category 2? Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor of moving the locations as described in category 2, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. It's unanimous. One
Then
less.
our final grouping is motion to return after renovation. The precincts are 9-3 to return back to Brown Station Elementary, 10-6 to return to Wayside Elementary, 1341 and 1370 to return to Wheaton Woods Elementary.
I move we move them to the home. That's a good one. That's
That's a
an
good
easy
one.
choice.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. So those are all the polling places?
Yeah. No more?
Yeah.
No more.
Let me,
Before we move forward, did you want to ask
Legal
the
description.
board to sign the legal description?
We're going to do that under new business.
Yeah, thank you.
Kind of at the end of the bill.
let me just ask the sense of the board, because I've been so concerned about moving 63,000 voters. What do they say in football? The best defense is offense?
Mm-hmm.
What's the sense of the board of outreaching to the press and or the State Board of Elections and or other outlets just to let them know what's happening and what efforts we've made for it not to happen?
Let's see what Margie said. She's a public officer, public whatever is your title.
Because first thing I was thinking of
because she's the one
is anybody who wants to join me on December 7th, I don't think the state board knows about the magnitude of these moves.
Yeah, they know.
I don't think so. Do they know we're moving 63,000 voters?
I haven't a clue.
I'm just saying, do we...
It's on December 7th, other than
State
Pearl
board.
Harbor Day.
State, in other words, do we want to be proactive now instead of at the last minute the world finding out that they're not voting where they have
Mr.
been?
President, first of all, we have to do all of the technical aspects of changing the polling place. Then in January, all 63,000 of these individuals will receive a voter notification card informing them that they've been relocated to a specific polling place as designated today. Additionally, in April, that draft, which is not completed, will be sent to all of 63,000 of these individuals, telling them that they've been moved from their old polling place to this new polling place. Then in the end of May, or approximately 7 days before the end of the close of voter registration, the sample ballot will be going out to all voters across the county, telling them where their polling place is and including the ballot. We can certainly add a media release that can go out in the next couple of days that tells the public that we made polling place changes and the list is being posted on our website. Polling place changes have been discussed by the board since May. We've talked about the problems we've had with the school system. I know that Nikki Carlson is reading our minutes every month. She knows that this has been a big discussion point. I have asked other election directors, are they having problems with the schools in terms of the date of the primary? Most of the other directors were not as far along in selecting polling places as we were. They were just getting started, getting their polling places lined up, and they basically said, well, yeah, we're going to have to change some, and oh well, that their reaction was considerably different. So it's not that there hasn't been a discussion.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, do we want to be more proactive?
And we are being proactive. We're sending a direct piece of mail 3 times to these voters.
Jim, I also think there may be a danger in drawing too much attention to this because we don't want to leave people with the impression that it's a question of we've never moved anyone before and this year we're moving 60,000 voters.
Yeah.
We always move a certain number of voters, probably more than most people realize. But as Christine said, I don't know that the volume of public complaints has been all that great. I don't know about the campaigns, but it's just a difficult year.
All right. I'm just very concerned that our board is going to get criticism / backlash from the community.
Well, I think that if that happens, then at that point we would respond. But we certainly have information out there. I agree with Alex that I think sometimes when you put something out there, more people become aware of it than need to, and sometimes that can create more of a problem.
Backlash.
And so,
What about the candidates?
Well, that's one of the reasons we're trying to get this complete, because they need the polling place list.
Absolutely.
So that's the top thing on our list, is to get the polling place list, numeric and alpha, in order so that we can get it posted on our website, hopefully by the 1st of December.
Another thing we can do is, as Chris offered earlier, is we can provide you with the numbers of how many voters we moved for previous elections. I don't think we've actually provided you with those numbers before.
No, that's what I had queried about earlier on because this is not the first time
I mean,
we've
but your
dealt with
voter
big
count,
numbers.
how many we moved in
We've
previous.
always posted this, and it always has had a number of voters impacted.
We'll just go back to previous board minutes
Right.
to pull those numbers, but we can put it together.
Thank you.
Okay, Margaret?
All right, election director report, personnel. We have a new person coming on board right after Thanksgiving that will finally take Brian McKevitt's spot. We'll introduce him to you at the next board meeting. Budget.
And what is that position, Margaret? I'm sorry.
He does the candidates, right, Brian?
Yeah, he'll be doing the candidates.
Who's been doing it now?
Artie.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, what do you mean he's been doing the candidates?
Yes, when they come to file, the filing of
Oh,
candidates.
the filings, okay.
We got a lot,
That does sound bad.
Yeah.
a lot of candidates.
Yeah.
I'm told my Democratic colleagues would know what was. David, there's 25 Democrats now in the primary for county exec, and I hear there's at least a dozen more coming.
A dozen more. Wow.
That's what I hear. Yeah.
How many Republicans?
Right now,
Yes.
we'll have a slate of 4.
We prefer to have less but qualified.
That's right.
I'm sure we don't want this meeting to turn into a discussion of the qualifications of
Okay,
candidates
let's
for
go.
office.
Okay.
Let's go.
Margie, budget.
Okay, budget.
Okay, you did receive the latest spreadsheet in your advance packet, numbers through October 30th, and we are showing that we have spent $1.7 million, which represents 19.73% of our budget for the fiscal year. We're 1/3 of the way through the fiscal year at this point. So, I think we're right on track. Obviously, once we get past the holidays and into January and February, we'll start bringing on personnel, so we'll start seeing some big expenditures at that point. But at this point, I think we're running at a pretty good pace with the funds, and I'd be happy to answer or attempt to answer any questions anyone might have.
Why the pay SPE 227,000? That's what.
Where are you at?
60066.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the State Board of Elections. That's program management. That's what we've been paid. What we have paid so far. What we've been invoiced for program.
What
management.
are they doing? We are not in the.
Program management covers many things. I'm turning to Margaret.
Program management includes all of the contractors that the state has doing different types of things. It would be preparing the various testing programs that we are going to be participating in December and January and February. It would be the development of surveys to determine how much equipment and various types of supplies we may need. It would include any temporary employees that the state needs to hire to help us get ready for the election.
Okay, Margaret.
And this is a percentage, right? Each county
Yeah,
pays their
each county
percentage based on
population. I think it's at 17%.
Yeah, we're now at 17%.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Margie.
You're welcome.
Voter registration, Jessica?
We are sitting at 647,494 active voters, 75,181 inactive voters. So we have a combined total of 722,675. And right now we're working on the ERIC, which is the comparison across voter data across 19 other states and the District of Columbia. So we're working through those records. We do this every 2 months. So that's what we're in the midst of. We have about 28,000 records that we're comparing right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, State Board of Elections. I included in my packet various COMAR provisions. Kevin is going to talk about the provisional and absentee proposed regulation. Then the other the numeric ballot stubs. The various election directors have been working to get rid of the stubs on the ballots. It's, as you all may recall, the ballot station is a kind of a choke point in the process of trying to get voters to move either through the lines at early voting or election day. So there was a survey that was completed by the various election directors, and 21 of the 24 entities would like to get rid of the numeric ballot stub, and instead we would replace it with these two something similar to these two labels. So what would occur is we would still have the numbering sequence, but when the election judge opens the packet, they would pull off one of the stubs, and they would affix it to a ballot accounting form, which we currently have them filling out the numbers. This would make the process a little bit simpler for them. We did send a letter to the 5 individuals that were working with the printer to the state board, asking them to allow the regulations to be changed to replace the perforated numbered stubs to a numbered sequence. And I believe in the packet that I sent to you, we believe that the voters overall see the ballot table as a choke point, particularly in the morning or even in those precincts that have an evening rush hour. Not having to remove the stub will greatly reduce that problem. We believe that it will add to a smoother operation at the early voting centers on election day. We really want the election judges to focus on handing out the correct ballot. If you paid any attention to the Virginia elections, one of the problems that was going on, and there were other states, people were handing out the incorrect ballots, and that's my greatest fear in the next election. So this getting rid of the ballot stub means that that's one less step that they have to go through. And so when they receive the voter authority card from the voter, all they have to do is focus on pulling, whether it's Republican. On this one we have BS ballot style 1 Republican, and then we have the sequence number. They can focus on making sure that they're pulling the correct ballot style for the correct political party for the primary. We also believe that it'll reduce potential ballot paper jams with the DS200, less foiled ballots, and we also think that it's going to contribute to the reduction of waiting in line. It requires that the election judges won't have to complete as much paperwork, and it certainly is simpler to remove this ballot stub, as the example, and affix it to the ballot accounting paper. We know that the judges on their own have been bringing X-Acto blades and staple removers and other tools that we really don't want in the polling place, especially the knives. Less waste of ballots. Again, the focus is on making sure that they hand out the correct ballot style. The state forms for accounting are streamlined. There's no need to retain the ballot stub, only to maintain the certificates, and again, reduction of lines. There's no loss of quality control. The ballots are still inspected when we've received the initial delivery. No loss of inventory control. No risk of stray ballots. No risk of unauthorized voters getting a ballot. No greater risk than voters receiving multiple ballots. And when you look, there's very few states that use a ballot stub any longer, because you can use these labels, and there's a specific name. I think it's an Avery label, in which you can just remove it, and then it can stick to another document. So that's what the various election directors have been working on to try to and it's going to be discussed on December 6th. Now, Anne Arundel County and Prince George's County boards are sending a letter to the state board recommending this change. If you're interested in joining them, I would appreciate it, because I do believe that the ballot stub is a choke point. We're not getting rid of the numeric system, we're just getting rid of the stub.
Margaret, do you think Linda and Nikki, have you talked with them about it? Do you think they're on board with this? I mean, ultimately, it's the state board that will have to decide. But
the thing that we're hearing right now is there may be a problem with COMAR regs as to whether or not we can get this done in time. I don't think that the state's opposed to it. I think they're more concerned about the regulatory process. And of course, there's always just the change element. Changing anything is difficult.
Of course, we've only done this once, right?
The ballot. Yes. Yes.
In the 2016 election.
Correct. But prior to the institution of the touchscreens, ballot stubs were used where optical scan ballots were distributed. And when you had punch cards, there also was a stub back in 2000.
And the purpose of the stub is it a tracking?
It's an accounting feature.
It's an accounting feature. And how does this...
well, there's still the accounting feature. We'd still have, instead of having the number up on the stub, which would be up here, it's down here. And you remove that and you place it on the ballot accounting form, which I don't know if I have one in here or not.
Are the labels associated with individual ballots or with groups of ballots?
No. Each pack is going to be 50 ballots.
So stubs are per ballot. This would be per 50.
Right.
No, because the stubs are at the top of all 50 ballots, right?
That's correct.
You're tearing the ballots off of the stub.
Every ballot has
But only one stub has one set of numbers, right? Not individual.
Well, all right. If you're tearing them off, do all the ballots from that packet have the same number or a different number?
No,
it gives you a range of numbers.
All we're required to do is to account for the ballots. So there's 50 ballots in every pack. So this would represent 301 through 350. The election judge would remove this label in this example, and we would affix it here. So then we know that this package of ballots had been opened.
Right.
So, and let's say in this mythical precinct, we send 1,000 ballots, and they open 10 packets. So that's what, 500? Mm-hmm. 500 ballots. So we have 500 ballots that were not opened, and then there's maybe 475 that were used by voters, because we know that X amount of 475 ballots went through the two DS200s, and there were 10 people that voted provisional and 15 ballots that were spoiled.
But under the current system with the stubs, when you were, let's suppose that you used 25 out of the 50, would the stubs be sequentially numbered so that you could so that they would be attached with an individual number, or would they all share the same number?
They would not share the same number.
So you do it. So you'd be going from a system where each ballot has an individual number associated with it to a system where a packet of ballots.
And the back of it is a list, Margaret.
Right.
So what do we? I mean, are we saying that we don't need that level of accountability? Because clearly there is a difference between having it for 50 and having it for 1.
We're not using that level of accountability. Any hypothetical benefit that we would gain from having an individually numbered stub for the voter is lost when our election judges are sitting there tearing off each of the ballots off of the pack and putting them into the folders. We're maintaining the accounting, or we're maintaining the volume in the order, we're maintaining that one-to-one relationship through the use of the voter authority card that accompanies the ballot.
As we have to.
But we're just having the election judges do all of that ripping off that we don't really have any functional, we're not gaining any benefit from it.
And the other thing is that there's an assumption made at the state board level that we are bringing open over a packet and we're tearing these ballots off one at a time, put it in the secrecy folder, and hand it off to the judge. And that there's this detailed level of accountability. But every one of you know, at 7 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning at early voting center, it's, we are going 100% an hour. I mean, we're going 1,000 miles per hour. And what we've told our election judges is you pre-tear those ballots off of those stubs and get them placed in the secrecy sleeve, and make sure that you only put one ballot in each secrecy sleeve, or 2 ballots if you have a constitutional amendment, and get those ballots handed out so people can vote. So the theory that there's, that we're doing, maybe they're doing it in a much smaller jurisdiction where everyone could sit there and politely tear it off, but we're not doing it in Montgomery County. And quite honestly, when we did the survey, I was hoping maybe we would get 5 of the 6 largest jurisdictions to agree. When I started getting emails from all of the counties, even the smallest counties, saying, let's get rid of these ballot stubs, and it ended up 21 out of the 24, I was like, oh wow, great.
What are the 3 saying? The 3 who didn't sign on?
Baltimore County, Howard County, and
Carroll County.
And do we know why?
I couldn't comment. No, we're not commenting.
Is Mayo going to take a position on it?
Mayo actually did.
Why can't you comment? I mean, if you're asking us to take a position, I certainly want to hear what the other side is.
I mean, I can only speculate too. I mean, I think Margaret nailed it when she said, change. I think that concern over what, people may think we're losing some level of individualized accounting, although we're not using it. And there's no procedure, there's no state procedure for us to write down all of these stub numbers and who got what stub. So there's no actual tracking at the voter level of these numbers.
Are others in the state tracking it at that level? Because it sounded like Margaret said it was an expectation.
No,
not
no
to my
one
knowledge.
is tracking it to that level. And if you look at it nationally, there are very few jurisdictions. No one in the state of Virginia, the entire election that was held in Virginia, no one had ballot stubs on their optical scan ballots. And I haven't had the time because of everything else that's been going on, but coming from Nebraska, we never had ballot stubs. Kansas doesn't have ballot stubs, and these are optical scan states that have had optical scan forever, going back to at least 1980s.
So what are you asking us for?
I'm asking if the board would choose to weigh in and send a letter to the state board asking to abolish the use of changing the Comar reg and abolish the use of the ballot stub and just use the abolish the one regulation and strike the language in Comar that says numeric sequencing by ballot. I think it's the language. Ballot stub is right there. 331001F, paren 1 and paren 2.
I think there was one proposal to abolish it entirely. There was one to replace shall with may, but in either event, the effect of it would be to allow counties individually to make a choice and to work direct. The printer is able to do it the same price either way.
Kevin, who can change Comar
Up to the county.
regulations?
The state.
State board.
The state board can?
Is this Word document, Margaret, that you sent, is this a draft letter or was this actually sent to?
We already sent it.
Okay.
You already sent?
That the letter from the director
From the
to the
director,
state
oh,
board
from the,
was already sent.
I guess
Is there a reason there was only 5 of them who signed when there was 21 who supported it?
This has been a work in progress since July. And when we started working on this idea to get, to look at trying to get rid of the ballot stuff, we were misinformed and we didn't follow up. So this was our bad, but it was bad that we got bad information, that there was no need to make a change in Comar. When I attended the biennial meeting and they were talking about Comar closing, that's I asked the question about the ballot being able to change the Comar regulation as it dealt with the ballot stub sequencing. And that was the first we heard that there was the door was closing. So we had a meeting where we attended a training for a new smart sheets, which the state is looking to have everyone working off of to share information. And the printer agreed to come down and visit with the participants that had been having discussions on how we would proceed and how we would need to change the election judge materials so that they could account for the ballots. We're not talking about, if we send 1,000 ballots to the polling place, we expect them to still account for the fact that they opened 10 of these 5 of the 5 packets, and that they spoiled X amount, and they used X amount for provisional voting. And then as soon as we heard that the door was closing on changing Comar, we just moved and had the 5 jurisdictions: Prince George's, Anne Arundel, our county, Harford County,
Baltimore City.
And at that time, the printer suggested that he could put the stubs on. If one county didn't want the stubs and another county did, he could print it either way. So we just wanted to get the ball rolling and say to the state, this is something we want to do now. We don't want to wait till 2020. We need to move it along. And then we presented it at the election judge meeting. The state has a subcommittee of individuals that are developing the election judge training material. So we presented it at that meeting. We had a Mayo meeting in which I presented with Dale Livingston from Harford County, and that was where the idea came up to do a survey. So then, working with Mayo, they developed a survey, and the survey went out. I was not the survey creator, but I was on the list, and that's when I started getting pings all the time with people saying, yes, get rid of these ballot stuff. So that's the whole genesis of how that occurred.
Thank you, Margaret. I don't think we can ask the president to write a letter to the state board on.
Basically with these technical issues, I generally defer to the staff.
Right.
Well,
That's fine.
And I think, Jim, you could write a letter saying we are fully in agreement with the October 26th letter, and you could maybe enclose this talking point list that she had, the case to allow counties, and say these seem to be very compelling reasons.
Could you put a draft together with all the...
Yes, I will. Okay, then the privacy screen. The state board has decided to address the privacy screen. There's 2 things. This is optional, but I think it's a pretty good idea. One is the individual election judge is going to have to stand, is it 18 inches or 2 feet?
2 feet.
2 feet away from the DS200. And we're going to, they're developing a privacy screen. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to cut this out so that we can see that no one gets into the back of this and tears out the memory stick. And we're going to have our logo here. But hopefully this will address, and it's not going to be quite as high. It's probably going to be about 3 inches lower. And this way, when a person goes through, even if the election judge is not doing what we train them to do and staring at the DS200, there will be some level. But what we'll have them put it up, and then we'll have the Montgomery County logo on the side. So that's what's going to happen for 2018. And then ES&S is commencing training for all the local board staff in December, looking at the 850 and the DS200 and whatnot. So that's what's new with the state board. Their next meeting is, I believe, December 6th.
6th or 7th. Kevin?
Yes, thanks. Margaret had mentioned a COMAR change, and one change is a change to whether a provisional or absentee ballot is counted if the board receives both. And you may remember that there was a proposed change that if the absentee ballot had not been received by the time that the provisional canvass was either beginning or had been completed, that you count the provisional ballot. And this board wrote a letter saying that the COMAR change that would be more suitable would be that if someone votes a provisional ballot and an absentee ballot, that you count one of them. Obviously, you don't count both of them. And the state board has accepted that proposal, and the provisional ballot will be accepted and the absentee ballot will be rejected, which I think makes sense because the provisional ballot logically would be the second ballot that would have been cast or filled out, which is consistent with the logic that the state has for absentee ballots, which is if you have the board receives 2 absentee ballots from the same voter, you accept the second absentee ballot and you reject the first. Margaret has heard from some of her colleagues that they feel that this may delay the process, but I don't think it will, because as you recall, we have to catch people that are potential double voters right at the very beginning. You all, the board staff gets an E40 report, and everyone who the report says may have voted early, may have submitted an absentee ballot, may have voted provisionally, and any one of those that they may have tried to vote twice, those are segmented out anyway before the first absentee ballot canvass begins. So I don't see that that's going to be an issue.
Yeah, that was my question. No. Really, they're done that quickly?
They're done.
I mean, we would know the provisional voters at that point, or staff would.
You'll know the potential absentee voters because that report is generated, downloaded. The staff then goes through everything that would be canvassed during the first absentee canvass, and those absentee ballots are taken out of the canvass, and then obviously they would then get paired with any provisional ballot that may have been cast. So yeah, it gets caught on the front end. It's really no different. If we didn't do that, then you'd have people that could have voted when you didn't have the regulation that you'd accept one or the other. You'd have absentee ballots that would be counted because we wouldn't know one way or the other that their provisional has been returned. So I think logistically it should work out fine.
But I thought that's what I would see in provisionals. My cough. That indicated they had voted absentee.
Don't cry.
You do that. You do see that, but you see that as a potential double voter in the context that, based upon that E40 report, their absentee ballot was taken out of the canvass. And then when the staff was researching the provisional ballots, they then got paired up, and that's the list that Allison's generally brought in. So this is why we think they tried to vote twice. Here's their absentee, here's their provisional. They're paired together. And so we have those certainly at the time that we do the canvass, the provisional canvass, they've been paired up.
And in those instances, we couldn't count either one of them.
You can't count either one, which was one of the things that the board pointed out, which is you return 2 absentee ballots, we count the later one. If you return an absentee and a provisional, you don't count either one. And the logistics, the reality of this, having seen it time and time again, is that a lot of people go to cast their provisional ballot because they call back on election day. They don't realize that there's this back-end window for all these absentees to be counted and canvassed. And so they call in their absentee ballot, nothing's been done with it. And so they vote provisional.
Alex, you have a question. Remember, Alex had a question about the status of the lawsuit. Alex, did you?
Oh, just about, well, actually, before I get to that, how do we track whether someone's tried to vote twice, even by sending in a second absentee ballot? Do we, when something comes in, we check the system for the name to see if they've already voted? Is that how it?
They'll come up as the first way we catch them is the second time. To get a second ballot, they have to have a second ballot issued.
Okay.
So we immediately know through MD voters that 2 ballots have been issued.
So when a request comes in, then you check it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And then as it relates to other, like voting in an early voting site, when all those results get uploaded, then you'll know who voted early, who voted absentee, so that in the poll book on election day, if I had voted early and I go into my polling place, the poll book would say, you've already voted at an early voting site. So that's the safeguard for me not then be given a ballot that I can scan into the system. They would say you have to vote provisional.
And then how do we know of those people who voted provisionally for that reason that it was because they already voted? Because they're just issued a provisional ballot, right? Is there some tracking of
the election judge is supposed to check the reason why they were given a provisional.
All right.
In an ideal world. So that would be there.
Okay.
Alex, you had a question.
My question is on a different subject, the Judicial Watch lawsuit. I remember seeing a draft of the reply brief. Did it actually get filed, or were we still waiting on it?
It has been filed, and the state has filed its reply. So the briefing has been completed in the Judicial Watch case. The case is pending in front of Judge Hollander, and under our local rules, the court is not required to have a hearing. Judge Hollander holds hearings every once in a while, but oftentimes she decides motions right on the briefs that are submitted. So what I would anticipate is in the next 3 to 6 months that Judge Hollander will issue a thorough opinion. She writes very long, Alex has seen them, very long, thorough opinions on the cases in front of her. So as long as it stays in front of Judge Hollander, that's what I think we'll end up getting.
You think a hearing is unlikely?
I think it is, because it's a pure legal issue, and the local rule provides that unless the judge believes that oral argument would aid the decisional process, they usually waive it. And that's the practice certainly for a lot of the judges in certainly the Northern District. The Southern District is more inclined to have hearings, but most of the judges in the Northern District, they do not hold hearings. So, but no timetable, but I would say probably 3 to 6 months. So, any questions?
Okay. Old business, early voting, leases.
The status of this is we have chosen 11 early voting centers. So Mr. Kropinski's organization, office, put together MOUs for what's called the right of entry for the 8 county-owned locations, and then 3 individual right of entries for the 3 private locations. We have a fully executed document back from the Renaissance Chef at Sandy Spring, and we have a fully executed document back from Gaithersburg, City of Gaithersburg, for the Activity Center. The county attorney's office has the right of entry for the 8 buildings, and that we anticipate will move along quickly. And we're working with Father Gary at St. Catherine's to have the St. Catherine right of entry signed. With the Catholic location, the Archdiocese requires that we have an insurance policy through Catholic Mutual. We have submitted that paperwork to Catholic Mutual, and that's moving forward. So now basically we need Father Aguirre to sign off on the details, like the times and the dates and so forth. So we have reassurance that the building will be available on the days and times that we need it. So that's the status.
Kevin, I don't think we've ever discussed it. What's the liability of the board as an entity in terms of someone slipping on a banana peel at a polling place or something?
Well, the Board of Elections is part of the Montgomery County self-insurance pool for election activities, and you do have people that slip in polling places.
Right.
But that's all handled through the Montgomery County pool.
Okay.
Do we do agreements for the backup locations?
That's part of the MOU for Montgomery County, which will, in the MOU, it provides the 3 locations and that they will be made available if needed for early voting. So that's part of the MOU. And I don't see any problems with, it's the same MOU that we've used since the beginning of early voting with Montgomery County. So we had to tweak it a little bit, like no construction at all at an early voting site. Well, we know that there's going to be stuff going on at Potomac, so we had to make some minor changes. We changed some rooms. Obviously, voting's occurring in Potomac in a different room. It's occurring in a different room at Lawton. So there were some minor changes, but the general language that's going to be in the MOU is, in essence, the same as it's always been. And I'm dealing with the same people that I've always dealt with.
And the same MOU covers all of the county sites, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And are we as far along with the non-county sites as you want us to be at this point?
I would like to have a signed MOU, but we will direct our attention to get that done by December 1.
Father.
Father. Okay.
He's been waiting for the insurance company. So
Al, did you want to say?
Yes, can I follow up on a suggestion that David made last time regarding the Potomac Rec Center and the parking and making sure that the judges are shuttled in so there are more places available there. When it comes to Lawton, I understand in the past that the board has arranged with the town of Chevy Chase police to free up parking around the Lawton Center so that there's overflow parking without people being ticketed. And also regarding the St. Catherine site, you probably know if you try to get in there off of Veers Mill, it's very difficult. You miss the site, the entrance very, very quickly. One thought, you may want to consider routing voters down to Claridge, up in that way. It's safer. And then certainly, I don't think you want any voters coming out of St. Catherine's onto Veers Mill. It's going to be very dangerous. So maybe we give signs to suggest that they exit the campus on Claridge.
there's an exit between the ball field and the church.
Oh, I guess I didn't even say. I always went in and out of Claridge. Yeah.
That's safer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can go in and out right off of Veers Mill, and it's after a uphill than a downhill, so you can miss people, or you can hit them if you're not paying attention.
I think the board should contact Mr. Hoffman at the town of Chevy Chase and see whether you all need to make another formal request to have Elf Street parking in the town of Chevy Chase, because if they don't waive it, you can't park there.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you suggest that we do that?
The presidency shall.
Start through staff?
Yeah.
I mean, all we're asking for is the same thing they did before.
Yeah, I would contact Todd Hoffman. I'll get you his contact. I'll give Margaret his contact information.
Yes.
Margie did it the last time.
Town manager.
Margie did it. Okay, Margie will do it. Just ask.
I thought board members went to the council.
You did.
Oh, okay.
But I reached out to see what we needed to do.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Margie.
Yeah, if they need a meeting.
Allison?
Can I just seek some clarity, because this discussion about shuttling in the workers at Potomac has come up in a couple of meetings, and I just want to get a sense of how firmly committed you are to that. There was I would say, a fair amount of consternation from the judges themselves last time, Not so much because of shuttling them in, which, yes, it's an earlier time for them to meet at whatever the other location is and then be shuttled in. It's more a matter of then needing to shuttle them back at the end of the day. People can't leave on a staggered schedule. We've got to, that makes things just a little bit more challenging in terms of people who are working split shifts. Or is this something that it is imperative to the board that we make sure we do, or is this something that you just want to make sure we're focused on and doing our best to try to minimize the use of parking by judges?
Was it mandatory or optional?
That's my question, is that,
what we did at Potomac was we called all the election judges and told them that we would be shuttling, that they were to park at the synagogue. The synagogue had given us permission. And we were shuttling them down. Mm-hmm. And it did not go well. They basically said, if you make me park up there, we quit. So we said, okay.
There were several people who felt that way.
Do we know how many people took advantage of it?
Not very many. Chris, you were driving.
Very few. We had 15, 20 election judges, and we would go over and we would maybe have 2 or 3 that had parked at the synagogue parking lot, and then we would take them, and then in the evenings when we were to close up was when it really, as Allison mentioned, became a logistic problem because people were ready to go, leaving at different times.
Al?
My recollection was there was a backup on Falls Road, people trying to get into the polling place, I maybe recalled better than me, and so you have police there to guide them in there and to direct traffic going past them.
We did have police there.
Yeah.
And we plan on having police there again.
Good.
Oh, good.
To answer your question from my perspective, I'm just interested in any suggestions to free up parking spaces. And if shuttling people is not a good one, then whatever else we can come up with, because I think that there's a significant problem there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe letting them park in one of the courts or something, or just for the election judges, that might be an option.
Alex, did you want to raise?
We'll keep our eye on it and try to come up with creative solutions.
Okay.
See what we can do that'll be successful.
It would also be useful for us to know what they are, so that when people talk to us about it, we can say, here are the things we're doing to try and make it better.
Okay. Alex, did you want to raise that?
Well, since we're talking about the board attorney report, I thought I would mention to my colleagues that since this has to do with Mr. Karpinski, I was contacted by a gentleman named Seth Miller a few weeks ago. You may know him. He's been involved with the Robin Ficker campaign, but he's a paralegal who works for a local attorney in town. And he was at our firm for a real estate section meeting of the Bar Association of Montgomery County, and I was giving a presentation on legal matters, but I guess he knew or found out that I was with the board, and I know when he's contacted some others about wanting the board to file a complaint with the Attorney Grievance Commission against Tom Moore, who, as you know, was the plaintiff in the lawsuit that unsuccessfully challenged the petition signatures for the term limit petition last year. I told him I would raise the issue with the board. He seems to think there was a conflict of interest that Mr. Moore had. I don't see that he did. I believe then and believe now that Mr. Moore's suit was objectively baseless and should never have been filed, and we should not have had to spend the money to defend it. But I don't see that he had any kind of conflict of interest given his position at the FEC. So I told him that I would certainly raise the issue for discussion, but I was not going to recommend that we file any kind of complaint with the Attorney Grievance Commission against Mr. Moore.
He's called me in the past and a couple of times, and I've always referred him to Kevin. He wants the board to officially file a complaint with the Attorney Grievance Commission because Mr. Moore is employed by the Federal Election Commission and was the plaintiff in an election case here, and I referred him to Kevin.
And I've told him that I would not recommend that the board file a complaint because I don't see any basis for a complaint. But he certainly is free to do that himself. But
the theory is that because of his employment, he doesn't have a right to do it?
Well, I never really got whether it was necessarily an attorney grievance issue or it was a prohibition against the regulations for being a federal employee.
I think the complaint was that he was raising money also in opposition to the petition campaign.
He was participating in a political campaign.
Whether that was
But the Hatch Act doesn't apply unless there's Democrats and Republicans, and this was a referendum.
It was more of a conflict of interest when he told me, because he's
Yeah,
employed by the Federal Election Commission, and he's working on a political campaign. He thought that was an attorney violation.
I echoed Alex's sentiment that there's not that I don't think there's a conflict.
Well, he can file a complaint.
And I don't take filing complaints lightly. So.
But he can. I mean,
It doesn't sound like a Hatch Act violation
No.
either. So, I mean, federal employees do have rights to do things as individuals.
No, yeah, we all agree with that. But he's persistent. He keeps calling.
Okay. If, Mr. President, new business,
Yeah.
we need to reinstate 1367 and 1368, and we have the new precinct descriptions. They've been proofed, and Chris needs everyone's signature.
The descriptions, same as the old descriptions from before we merged the precinct.
Yes, there's nothing changed in the boundaries from the prior. So the first one is reinstating 13, we'll date it for you, but 1367. And as Allison said, the boundary is exactly the same as it was originally.
Okay.
The next one,
Oh,
Mr. Pollock, is 1368, and it's the same situation where we've gone back to the original boundaries.
Oh, particular color?
Well,
that's it, huh?
yes.
Oh,
And then we
okay.
have
I thought all the board had two.
Yeah, Allison and Ms. Jurgensen will sign as well.
Mary Ann's, remember when after redistricting, the board spent 45 minutes signing these things.
Yes, that's exactly
Passing them
right.
around the table like
Horrendous.
Like a treaty sign.
Hey, thank you.
Sure, here's your,
You know how.
someone to steal it.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the board has adopted the new, or signed off on the new precinct descriptions for 1367 and 1368. I have no further, unless there's some new business that the board wishes to bring up, I have nothing else to add. Except happy Thanksgiving.
Well, I guess we need our picture. I went out at 4 o'clock and tried to reach Jackie on both her home and her cell phone and got voicemail on both.
Did she notify anybody that she wasn't coming?
No.
And I sent her a little concerning.
I know.
So I guess the only other issue is whether the board desires to have a December meeting.
Well, there's one of the, well, we can talk about that. Yeah, I mean, Margaret, is there anything that the staff thinks is,
Not at this time.
in the past we haven't had a December meeting, is that correct?
Well, we probably will next year.
Next year. Well, you'll be doing certification.
No December.
Do we need a motion on that, or?
No, we just don't have December.
Anybody,
It says tentative.
yeah, anybody around the table want to talk about it, or?
I want a meeting
I have a
on
question.
December 25th.
My question is, when is the deadline? When do the ballots have to be sent? Because we have something in our packet that affects how the ballot is going to look for one of the party committees. I just wanted to know
When the ballot needs to be sent out to voters? military and overseas voters 45 days.
No, it's not when it gets sent, not sent, set, as in
Oh,
where.
set.
Yes.
Printed?
Yes. In other words, when.
March.
So there's plenty of time in January or February if there's any conversations that need to be had. Okay, great, thank you.
So it's the sense that we're not going to have a meeting in December. Lisa,
That's what I
you-
heard. That's fine. That's what I heard. So the next
Are
board
you
meeting.
upset about that?
No. Is the next board meeting January 22nd, 2018 then?
Yes, the next board meeting,
January
January 22nd, 2018.
Is there a reason that the schedule for next year only goes through August? I didn't know if that meant that, are we going to be still on the third Monday, or do we know what the rest of the year looks like yet?
I was trying to be nice because we were already on 3 pages on the agenda
Okay.
to add other dates.
Okay, but basically it's just the same.
It'll be the same unless
yeah.
otherwise indicated
It'll be the
by
third-
the board.
The third Monday.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so no meeting in December. Okay, one last thing. When I had lunch with Alan, and how'd you like your first meeting, by the way?
Easy.
Yeah, and it came up today because I was gonna go to the state board meeting and cry and talk about how upset I am about moving 63,000 voters, but I got the sense of the board that it's not prudent to do that at this time. And when I spoke to Alan said, and I appreciate that Alan was going to, if he could, make the state board meetings. We spoke about that. So, knowing tonight, I was going to go to the next meeting and make a big thing, but I'm not going to go. So I think we need a policy about going to the state board and telling the board that they're going, and then, hearing back what happened at the board. And if someone's going to talk at the board, it should be the sense that they're speaking for the board or as an individual. In other words, some guidelines about going to the state board. Because I was going to go, I'm not going. Because the board said, don't go. So, Nahid, I mentioned that to you. You said you had a motion?
Don't go.
No, I
Did
mean...
we say don't go?
No, but I'm not going to go because I was going to make a big simus. That's a good word.
We just have to have a policy when we go before the board, when we talk to them. Is it our own opinion or is the opinion of the board? We always had some policies. Kevin can talk
Generally,
about
the policy has been that, if the board says that the board president or some other board member should go and speak on a particular topic that's been discussed, and it's the consensus of the board that that's their position on it, the person that's speaking on behalf of the Board of Elections. If you could just get called on the carpet, as I think Mary Ann has at times, where they say, Mary Ann, what do you think about this? Then the board member says that they're speaking not as on behalf of the board, but they're speaking given their own, their own opinion on the particular issue. I think that's been kind of the consistent. I think it's been certainly not been a policy, but sort of the practice that's gone back for many.
Oh, no, I encourage board members to go to the state board meeting. That's a good idea.
Isn't what you said true wherever we go? I mean, if I...
certainly what I recommend.
Yeah, I mean, if I go talk to somebody about something, I always make clear I'm speaking for myself.
Yes.
Alex was commenting that he spoke somewhere on a legal issue and someone came up to him and started talking to him. I'm sure he made clear that, he was one board member, et cetera.
Yeah. So I think that's clear.
Sure. That's fair.
I think that's clear enough. Okay, so the next meeting is January 22nd. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And we're going to take our picture.
And you're going to have to Photoshop Jackie into it.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
So, I move we adjourn the meeting.
Wait, we have a motion to adjourn. And a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.